What is an innovation cluster, for goodness sakes, and what's the future of them? We'll talk about that today on Builders Live. Hey, I'm Chris Wink. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Technically, the news organization with a community of technologists and entrepreneurs. Today, we're talking about innovation clusters. Don't fall asleep yet. I know that seems like a jargony term. We're going to talk a little bit about what the heck it means and why we're still using the term. To do that, I'm joined by Tiffany Wilson. Since 2020, she has been the CEO and president of the University City Science Center in Philadelphia, that we know her work and reputation goes far beyond. Tiffany, thanks for being here.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, Tiff, before we went live, we had a moment of conversation about this innovation clusters term. I have been for 15 years reporting on this: agglomeration effects, ecosystems, community, economy. I know these terms seem so difficult to wrap one's head around. They do some work. Maybe help me. What terms are you using, and what do you even mean by them? Let's cut through the jargon. What term are you using?
Yeah, so I really think about it in terms of ecosystems, right? The cluster concept is very traditional economic development in the classic sense of how do you pick a certain sector. You know, in Greater Philadelphia, the focus has really been on cell and gene therapy and the related industries such as biomanufacturing. So you want to create a cluster of assets to support the economic growth that's going to come from that. Federal funding feeds into that. But at the end of the day, the pragmatic kind of practical approach is an ecosystem of life sciences and healthcare technology companies and startups and innovators. And what are all the things that are needed to support that to have successful economic growth?
So noted. And I sure have spent 15 years trying to find less jargon-full words, and I haven't found them. So they do a job. So I sure use them. Thanks for bailing me out and telling me that I can use ecosystem and the like. But let me challenge the premise. This is the real origin of you and me talking. We technically have had a whole lot of conversations around this whole place-based stuff, and particularly in the bench science research, kind of like classic gritty. We get breakthrough technology, we find a way to commercialize it. There's lots of great research that people love that say this very perhaps intuitive thing, that two researchers, two innovators, two inventors that are nearer to each other are more likely to collaborate than if they're not near to each other. And research papers often say the really obvious thing, that Tiffany and Chris, even if we're cross-disciplinary, even if we have different backgrounds, if our offices are near, we're more likely to get lunch together, and we're more likely to talk about our stuff, and we're more likely to find a little way that we meet, and we're more likely to do work together. That is classic economic development cluster strategy. That's why we got to get people together. Why these people build buildings and say we want cross-disciplinary work. It's the framework of everything we did in the late 20th century. Here's the challenge. I wonder if all this research is a little bit dated. Did the pandemic shift something in us and norms shifted? Are you and me playing Minecraft together as likely to lead to a Nobel Prize as you and me having offices nearby? Does physical proximity matter going forward as much as it did in the past?
Well, Chris, if Minecraft is on deck for Nobel Prize, I'm not going to win. It's just not.
Well, you and me playing Minecraft, and we're just chatting, just like we did instead of over lunch. We're just talking about our research fields.
So I
think having the same thing.
I think there's a few things here. Number one, I don't think we're going to go back to pre-pandemic days and the normal cadence and structure of work. Number two, if I am looking at to UCity Square, researchers at Penn and Drexel and CHOP who are doing traditional lab-based research and that biomanufacturing that's going to happen from that, you have to be in the lab to do that. No one can do biotech in their kitchen.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's an element of that. And we saw it through the pandemic. The researchers, the companies that were building solutions, particularly during the pandemic, didn't lose a beat. Things kept moving forward. At the end of the day, I am just like everyone, happy if I get the day to work from my home office, with my sweatpants on and my coffee and just relax. But that's not the solution either. You can't have collaboration in a entrepreneurial ecosystem in that way, because at the end of the day, we're all still human, and that's where the creative sparks go, the serendipitous, connections, staying behind after a meeting where you might have some lingering thoughts and a brainstorm. If I'm on a Zoom with you and have a great idea 5 minutes after we hang up, it's unlikely that I'm going to be able to connect with you via Zoom again. Of like, hey, you know what? I was thinking X, Y, and Z. Right. So, and then you just forget or you get distracted with something else. So I think we need to be mindful of that and think intentionally about the non lab work of the way that we continue to function as human beings do, even in the environment of digital transformation and AI and all of these things that are going to free up a lot of time. And then finally, I think we're at this intersection and this time of bioconvergence and the
Mm,
the opportunity for sharing across ecosystems. And so in Pennsylvania, for example, I remain very interested, curious about how do we align the innovative research in life sciences and gene therapy in Greater Philadelphia with, for example, what's happening on the other side of the Commonwealth in Pittsburgh as it relates to data, machine learning, robotics, and what's happening in the med tech sector. And the new ideas that and companies and economic activity that can be when the two researchers or the companies collaborate in different ways. Those are situations where this kind of online format can really be fruitful, I think. And
mm,
we need to think about how you incentivize that behavior, and how do you provide opportunities for learning and sharing in new ways.
mm. Let me touch on. I think federal policy is one of the biggest changes in my. I mean, at least just my limited 15 years of reporting on this stuff. That 2010s, we're still in the heart of digital transformation, so we're still moving relatively approachable industries into data science, and so much of the entrepreneurship conversation was around SaaS platforms and food delivery apps, and we had technically reported on, certainly, biomedical breakthrough technologies, commercialized technologies out of academia were happening, but it didn't seem like it had the public's consciousness that I think now
Mhm.
we're talking about. After a pandemic, obviously mRNA had a moment, and AI guided drug discoveries. Like, we're moving into these more regulated industries, and now suddenly, out of the blue, for the first time in my career, federal policy has ballooned in CHIPS Act, a whole basket of IRA related programs in advanced manufacturing, the EDA tech hubs program, both Baltimore and Philadelphia still in the running now for pretty major $75 million plus programs. Kind of curious, when you look at innovation clustering or this kind of research fueled ecosystem type stuff, how much is the moment we're having with federal funding, whether you think it's good or not, whether you think industrial policy is good or not, how much is that shaping what you think of as ecosystem building, and where it happens? Is that playing a role for what you're seeing?
I think the federal dollars are critical coming out of the pandemic on a number of fronts, but certainly with the focus on health and then the overall supply chain that's going to be required to support the investments in those sectors to make sure that we don't miss a beat when there's the next pandemic or other challenges. And but really thinking about it from a startup creation and a job growth and the workforce and STEM education. So, you mentioned the Tech Hub. We're working closely with Ben Franklin and the Chamber and Penn Drexel to support the Ben Franklin's concept around precision medicine. The ARPA H funding, and the big transformational ideas that will come from that is not about incremental change, big bets, big moonshot bets in healthcare to solve some of the biggest problems. The Science Center is a spoke for both the Dallas Customer Experience Hub and the Investor Hub in Cambridge. So I'm really excited about, what that is going to translate into from a investment, job growth perspective. And then the other bits of the ecosystem, that how do you support STEM education? How do you make sure that, like Mayor, if you look at what Mayor Parker is doing in Philadelphia, how do we make sure that there's opportunity for job growth in these sectors for everybody?
Mm.
And so I think, the federal government, federal funding has been a tremendous challenge, opportunity, and for the investment needed to make some of these things happen.
Let me backtrack a second because Dr. Marion Leary has entered the chat, a longtime friend of the Technically show. The ideal mix of, when I think of someone who's been in the cracks, meaning she's been inside institutional academic work, she hangs in innovations and innovators, she's been a practitioner. So just long quote here, so I'll pull it down because I'm taking up a lot of screen time. But what she's really saying is, hey, during the pandemic, I sure was collaborating with people across institution in a way that I wouldn't otherwise. It wasn't only in person. So I just want to backtrack a sec here, Tiffany, on like innovation clusters. The marriage we saw, I'm going to pull this quote down. The marriage we saw in late 20th, early 21st century, there was a marrying between economic development strategists, policymakers, academic institutions that said, hey, we do deep breakthrough technologies, the real popular rise of tech transfer offices of we have academics doing great stuff. We're going to be a lot more intentional about commercializing it. And local policymakers and economic development people, you should care about it because it's
Mhm,
all going to happen within your jurisdiction. So, you can
mhm.
get tax money, you can get jobs, and there was a happy marriage. And some stuff shifted where the internet on the whole doesn't care about geographic boundaries. So just revisit that point, Tiffany, of it made sense to say, yes, you could only do your academic work cross-disciplinary. So Philadelphia's big bet on the university city
Mhm.
is Penn, Drexel, pretty easy. Temple researcher can hop on a subway ride with one transfer, and you could have a meeting or your labs can be nearby. Does innovation clustering change when we all got more
I think
normalized, say in the evening, I can share what I did that day. And do we talk about it cross institution in a way that we didn't for the early part of the 20th century,
I
21st
think
century?
Yeah, I think so. And Marion, thanks for the question. I'm also a huge fan of Marion Leary, and I agree. I think that what I don't want the takeaway to be is that I don't think that collaboration and innovation needs to happen only in person.
Mm.
I think that prior to the pandemic, I almost never got on Zoom calls. Right, I was on
Hmm.
do conference calls and things like that. We have learned to communicate in new ways and collaborate in different ways. I don't want us to lose the human connection and the ability to do that, but I think the kind of hybrid approach can help accelerate that. And then people can, depending on what you're working on in the different stages, people can work wherever. I mean, I'm seeing in the med tech sector, I've just come from a couple of different conferences where an innovator might be in one city and the startup may be based in that city, but the team are able to build a team virtually from all different parts of the country based on the subject matter expertise and the relationships at that time.
Yeah.
So I think there's lots of different models. I just want us to really be careful about not losing the human connection and the ability to kind of interact and communicate in person, and recognizing the natural sparks that will come from that. And I think it'll continue to evolve over time.
Mm. I think that's for sure. I'm already over time. I had two little things I want to get to, but maybe I'll shoot my shot and pick one. Big conversation on the pure software side of technology or innovation. Big conversation has been access to tech careers. Workforce programs have had a real start and stop um, effort the last 30 years. Coding boot camps in the last 20 years. We're gonna try to make tech careers more accessible, and there's been good and bad here. We have watched um, some of that diversity in software development happen. Different pathways have changed, but it hasn't been transformative. It's been a slow and incremental shift. Um, lab-based work, innovation clustering coming out of academia, these broader tent of STEM careers is having a similar conversation. If you have a big research institution in Baltimore City, in Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia, in DC, are more residents going to benefit from these big shiny buildings and the smart people going into them? Kind of curious, Tiffany. I happen to know Science Center has programs on this, but talk to me a little bit about, can more local residents benefit from this innovation clustering taking place in their cities than have happened in the past?
I think so. Yes. I mean, obviously, we've got, our kind of real focus has been on our firsthand program, providing middle school and high school students in West Philadelphia an opportunity to come into the Science Center during the day and be in a dedicated lab, mentored by scientists on the campus. So that you get a real insight into what kind of pathways. And then you get the STEM and digital literacy required to go on to the next sector. I think that there's been a lot of funding flowing into workforce training, workforce development across the board. And I think what I'm seeing now is more coordination between all the different entities to understand that more people can see themselves in science related jobs, trust the process,
Hmm.
understand the pathway and I think of it in terms of a relay race. And so, if to understand all the myriad of jobs that are available, what sparks interest, and then who do I need to connect to and what are the skill sets needed to get to that place? That's what I'm really interested in seeing over the next couple of years of, hey, we've put all these ideas out here. A lot of different programs successful for one type of job or the other. How do we now stitch it together in a more holistic way where the pathways are more clear?
Mm,
We have more work to do.
for sure. Tiffany, I have a lot more to ask, but no more time. That's Tiffany Wilson, CEO of the University Science Center. Look for the recap of what we think about the future of innovation clusters coming up on Technically. Tiffany, thanks for your time.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
See everyone next time.